We had a struggle.
We had a Wi-Fi, not Wi-Fi, a technological struggle.
Yeah, I don't even know. Something happened.
Something happened and we match. That makes me happy. We're both wearing brown and black, I think.
Matchy.
That makes me super happy.
We're so on the same.
We can't get here on time, but we can look good. And that's the important thing.
It is very, very important.
Oh, Jen, welcome.
Stacy, good to see you. I missed you last week.
I know, I missed you too.
And I haven't had time to go back and watch. And I know you said at least one snarky thing, but I haven't found it yet.
I did say one snarky thing. And speaking of snarky things, I have to come back to a snarky comment I made about my wife talking to me about cricket crackers. Were you here for that, or was I must have been alone? And these are called crickets. And I said, ew, gross. They're high protein and sustainable because they are made from crickets.
Wow.
And so I was telling Robin, I wanted to show everybody these cricket crackers. This is the, there's herbed balsamic and original. This is the herbed balsamic. Anyhow, come to find out.
Are they chicken food?
No, they're human food. And come to find out, these food scientist students created this at the university, and some of them are selling them for, I don't know, because they're cool and they create things. It's so interesting to hear the amazing things that they create. Like there's this whole, you can make liquor out of whey, like milk whey. And there's this whole huge project going on around that. The whole bacon flavored seaweed thing came out of OSU. And now we have cricket crackers called crickets.
Which cheese do they pair well with?
For me, none. But for somebody, they will pair nicely.
Wow. Those are amazing.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Beyond crickets.
You're going to have to us. You're going to have to center us.
I do have a poem to center us.
Crickets. Okay.
It is called The Cure by Albert Huffstickler. We think we get over things. We don't get over things. Or say we get over the measles, but not a broken heart. We need to make that distinction. The things that become a part of our experience never become less a part of our experience. The way to get over a life is to die. Short of that, you move with it. Let the pain be pain, not in the hope that it will vanish, but in the faith that it will fit in, find its place in the shape of things, and then be not any less pain, but true to form. Because anything natural has an inherent shape and will flow towards it. And a life is as natural as a leaf. That's what we're looking for, not the end of a thing, but the shape of it. Wisdom is seeing the shape of your life without obliterating or getting over a single instant of it. Let the pain be pain, not in the hope that it will vanish, but in the faith that it will fit in, find its place in the shape of things.
That's nice.
Yeah, this idea of leaning in, not trying to vanquish the pain, but figure out the shape of it in our life, which is another way of saying creating meaning out of it.
I really appreciate that metaphor of finding the shape.
Mm-hmm.
It really works for me.
Me too.
Getting rid of it, as you're saying, not vanquishing it, not getting rid of it, not finding its shape.
Yeah.
Thanks, C. That was
yes.
Nice. Well, my Wi-Fi is struggling a bit. I haven't looked at This is the kind of week I'm having. I don't even know. I know it's Transfiguration Sunday, so I know
Mhm.
that the gospel is Transfiguration.
Mhm.
Beyond that, I know nothing.
Mm. Well, that's okay because not only have you spent much of your life preparing for this moment, Jen, but I have questions for us to ponder and sit with in relation to these
Awesome.
scriptures.
You're
So,
really prepared.
well, I'm moderately prepared. I spend maybe 30 to 45 or 50 minutes per week
Oh,
preparing.
good for you. That's kudos.
Because if I do too much, then I lose some of the spontaneity of it. And if I don't do any, I feel really stupid. So,
Yeah, I guess I understand. Yes, I feel that way too.
yes, yes.
That's how we make it. Where should we start? Do you want me to read a text?
Yeah. You can do the first one, which is 2 Kings 2, 1 through 12. And I love seeing you, Mary Lou and Lori and Connie, Leslie, Pam, and yes, Leslie, I agree. It does appeal to the visual way of comprehending.
It is really nice to see people.
Mm-hmm.
To know we're not alone, see? That. All right, here we go. 2 Kings 2, 1 through 12. Now, when the Lord was about to take Elijah up to heaven by a whirlwind, Elijah and Elisha were on their way from Gilgal. Elijah said to Elisha, "Stay here, for the Lord has sent me as far as Bethel." But Elisha said, "As the Lord lives, and as you yourself live, I will not leave you." So they went down to Bethel. The company of prophets who were in Bethel came out to Elisha and said to him, "Do you know that today the Lord will take your master away from you?" And he said, "Yes, I know. Keep silent." Elijah said to him, "Elisha, stay here, for the Lord has sent me to Jericho." But he said, "As the Lord lives, and as you yourself live, I will not leave you." So they came to Jericho. The company of prophets who were at Jericho drew near to Elisha and said to him, "Do you know that today the Lord will take your master away from you?" And he answered, "Yes, I know. Be silent." Then Elijah said to him, "Stay here, for the Lord has sent me to the Jordan." But he said, "As the Lord lives, and as you yourself live, I will not leave you." So the two of them went on. 50 men of the company of prophets also went and stood at some distance from them, as they both were standing by the Jordan. Then Elijah took his mantle, rolled it up, struck the water. The water was parted to the one side and to the other until the two of them crossed on dry ground. When they had crossed, Elijah said to Elisha, "Tell me what I may do for you before I am taken from you." Elisha said, "Please let me inherit a double share of your spirit." He responded, "You have asked a hard thing. Yet if you see me as I am being taken from you, it will be granted you. If not, it will not." As they continued walking and talking, a chariot of fire and horses of fire separated the two of them, and Elijah ascended into a whirlwind into heaven. Elisha kept watching and crying out, "Father, Father, the chariots of Israel and its horsemen." And when he could no longer see them, he grasped his own clothes and tore them in two pieces. Phew.
Lots of tearing and rending and separating and parting and preparing.
Yeah. Wow. I'm looking for an actual Bible here because I read that on my. So, yes, tearing, preparing, rending. I like all those words.
Mm-hmm.
What else have you thought about in connection?
Well, those were sort of initial themes that I picked up on, but there's this whole idea that I never thought about in terms of this story of Elisha and Elijah, this idea of preparing for a change that's ahead. And that made me think about my life when big changes are happening, like when I started grad school, or when I purchased a new house, or when I got married, or the big things. There's always been this sense of anticipation that kind of reverberates in my body. I can feel it. And I think I formerly might have called that the voice of the Holy Spirit. Now I think that it's probably all part of the sacred plan,
Mhm.
in which the human and the divine interact, and that's what that feels like. But what that left me with this whole section was, what tells you that changes are on the horizon? Either you, Jen, or people that are sitting with us today.
Yeah, it would be fun to hear from folks too in the comments. So can you say it just one more time? See what
What
tells
tells you that changes are on the horizon? We don't always have a prophet sitting there saying, well, this is what's going to happen.
yeah.
So most often it's something else that tells us changes are on the horizon.
Hmm, what a great question.
And it makes me also think about, do we trust ourselves? Or do we guess or think we're not good enough to hear or know for ourselves?
Yeah.
Are we willing to allow that change, embrace it, or be in charge of it?
These you're asking such big questions.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
yeah, I'm just thinking also about the change that's happening here for
Mm.
Elisha. It's not a small change. It's a
Mm.
life altering, world shifting,
Mhm. Mhm.
right? So in that way it reminds me of lots of different stories in the text about really seismic changes.
And our church has gone through
Mm.
seismic changes in the last 1.5 years.
Yeah,
It is going through a literal slash physical change now.
yeah. You know what I think is kind of funny? I was thinking about this the other day. I know I'm not answering your question. I'm dancing around it because I'm not sure that I know the answer.
Well, and it doesn't necessarily need to have an answer right now.
I've noticed that sometimes there are people who say, "Oh, I like change.
Mm.
Oh, I'm fine with change. I love change. Change is kind of my thing." And I'm always a little curious about that. I guess
Mhm.
like what kind of change? I wonder is a person's thing because I'm not sure that change in the kind of way we're talking, like not changing the color of the wall, right? But seismic change that shakes the bedrock of a person, a
Mhm.
community.
Mhm.
I'm not sure that we're supposed to take change in stride. Like, I wonder if that's healthy, actually.
I wonder if people can confuse it with having a sense of adventure,
Ah, yeah,
because there are people who really thrive. I'm not one of them. I like stability.
yeah.
I'm more like what you're talking about, that I'm not really eager for change. And I had there's a minister once who said, he used to say, life is a series of losses. Change is really just about loss, he would say. And life is a series of losses, one long series of losses. And it sounds kind of macabre or depressing, but that framework was actually really helpful for me because I feel deeply.
Yeah.
And for me to have struggles in even things from changing a shift at work or having a new colleague. I have a new colleague right now and I'm sad. I like my new colleague. I'm sad because there's been a loss around the former colleague.
Mm-hmm. I'm noticing how Lori and Leslie are both commenting about change, that that change can be surprising. It can come suddenly and maybe
Mhm.
it's warning signals or just signals that our body maybe can or can't give us, right? Depending on the kind of change
Yeah.
that we're
Right, right.
anticipating. And I love the thought about micro change, Leslie.
Yes, yes, me too.
Really, isn't that good? And recognizing that impermanence really is the name of the game. Nothing stays the same.
Nothing.
Ooh,
Micro changes, I'm not sure how micro changes might have, for example, helped prepare me for the pandemic.
ah, right.
But there's surely, now that I'm saying it out loud, Leslie, there surely is resilience that is built within me, within us, having sustained so many changes, losses, traumas, however you want to frame it, that bring us to a place where we can be physically still alive and mentally still somewhat stable in a big change like the pandemic.
Yeah. Sometimes I feel like maybe we don't need quite so much resiliency. Maybe we were okay before.
Right? Oh, I'm with you.
Yes. I really appreciate how you have taken that that text and a major theme and sort of plopped it into how our lives function and sort of an internal awareness of our own psychology. And it's such an iconic text, and it's so filled with Jewish imagery and prophecy, and it can be difficult to connect to that in any way other than like mythology or
Right. Like the chariot of fire. I mean, how many times have we experienced something like that?
yeah.
Yeah.
I like thinking of it in the way that you're suggesting, like big change, big surprise, pandemic.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
helpful to me. Thank you.
Well, and thanks all of us to all of you for just sitting with it. I think it's worth our consideration.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
I really like that. That's very helpful to me.
And you don't have to preach this Sunday, so you don't have to prepare,
Oh,
right?
yeah, I'm preaching this Sunday.
Welcome to your preparation.
Thank you. Thank you for all the help I can get right now.
No. Psalm 50, shall we move on?
Oh, if it's a psalm, you got to read it.
I've got to read it, which might have been what my snarky comment was about.
Well, that makes sense.
Okay, Psalm 51-6. The mighty one, God, the Lord, speaks and summons the earth from the rising of the sun to its setting. Out of Zion, the perfection of beauty, God shines forth. Our God comes and does not keep silent. Before him is a devouring fire and a mighty tempest all around him. He calls to the heavens above and to the earth that he may judge his people. Gather to me my faithful ones who made a covenant with me by sacrifice. The heavens declare his righteousness, for God himself is a judge. Oh, we have Jake Logan.
Jake Logan.
Yes, I love Jake Logan. Oh, and Jenny is here, and Earl. This makes me happy.
Well, Psalm Lady, what do you have?
Well, so this was what I was thinking about in regards to this section of scripture. Of course, again, we're talking about God's judgment. We're talking about big things, his sovereignty, devouring a fire, a mighty tempest all around him. There's, again, this big imagery like we were talking about before. And then in verse 5, it says, gather to me my faithful ones who made a covenant with me by sacrifice. So in the Old Testament, covenants were made with sacrifices, literal sacrifices. And then in the New Testament, Jesus becomes the sacrifice, and we can do away with sacrifices per se. So it made me wonder, what is covenant today? What does covenant look like in my life, church, work, relationships with myself, with my God today? And I was thinking about relational fidelity. We talked about that a few weeks ago, Jen. And then I was thinking about the covenant of church family. And there is something really sacred to me about being amongst a group of people that are committed to social justice, for example. So I am kind of a kindred spirit with somebody else who is devoted to the persons who are houseless in our community, or to people who are willing to speak out when they see racial injustice or inequity. And that makes me feel compelled to continue in my own personal journey and in my own behaviors and actions. But then it just made me wonder about other people. What does covenant look like for other people?
Hmm, really good question.
Mm,
I think about the word covenant itself in the Hebrew, like it's berit or something. It it I think we think of covenantal as happening in our heads or between hearts or between spirits, but it's actually
yeah.
it's an action word in the Hebrew. It's to cut a covenant and cut the imagery of like a blade cutting something is the idea of covenant. So you can probably think about that or take that in all kinds of different ways, but one way that intrigues me is to think about the idea that covenant is actionable,
Mm,
not just between minds or hearts. And there's a permanence, kind of a
yes. There's a mark made with a cut.
mhm,
Um, there's a difference in our lived experience
mhm.
when there's a cut.
Yeah. Y- yeah.
And if anyone else wants to share what your thoughts are around covenant, what covenant looks like for you in your present day life, or anything related to anything we've just spoken, please feel free to put it in the comments.
Yes. Put it in the comments. We would love to engage in conversation that goes
Mhm,
between you
mhm.
all as well as with us.
Yes, yes, indeed. So I don't have anything else related to that, and if you don't either, we can move forward. It's up to you, Jen.
You know, it's a psalm, so I'm good.
We hit a roadblock,
Um,
folks.
Here's some comments. Is that how it's related to sacrifice? Lori asks the idea of a cut. Well, you know why I actually there's some kind of historical commentary being made with this psalm around around the feast of sacrifice. Um, and so I think I don't know because the first time that we really get the idea of covenant um, is with, hmm, I mean, God makes covenants with the people before sacrifices become part of the gig. So I don't know. It's an interesting thought, and you may be right, Lori. It in this particular psalm, there's a social commentary being made about the festival of booths, and that we don't need to go into that. Although you could look it up if it's interesting to you of the historical context. The festival of booths.
And then, Connie said something I love, Connie, that you were still reflecting on the change. Seismic change, whether it arrives quickly or slowly, tends to alter my sleep cycle and the degree to which and places where my skin tingles. Yes, yes, and yes.
So Connie is clued in to
Yes.
some of those body shifts, which
Mhm.
can be challenging for some people. So I'm glad to know that about you, Connie.
Yeah, it's so funny that you said that because I almost said it's almost like when you're falling in love and you can't eat or sleep. You're so distracted, and it's a similar sensation for me physically. And so when you said it affects your sleep cycles, I thought, ah, that's my sister. She gets it.
Mhm, mhm. Okay, well, gospel or whatever the other reading is.
Um,
Shall we go?
2 Corinthians 4, 3 through 6. Would you like to read that one?
Sure. Okay, shorty. Second
Mhm.
Corinthians, Paul, our favorite person. And even if our gospel is veiled, it is veiled to those who are perishing. Oh man. And even if our gospel is veiled, it is veiled to those who are perishing. In their case, the God of this world has blinded the minds of the unbelievers to keep them from seeing the light of the gospel of the glory of Christ, who is the image of God. For we do not proclaim ourselves, we proclaim Jesus Christ as Lord, and ourselves as your slaves for Jesus' sake. For it is the God who said, "Let light shine out of darkness," who has shone in our hearts to give the light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ. Okay, and I say, oh man, because this is so Paul, right? This is
Yeah.
so Christocentric. So, all right, well, there you go. See, what are your thoughts here?
My thoughts are yes. The one of the things that has been so helpful for me, I was telling my therapist this week that doing this time with you, Jen, has forced me to sit with my upbringing, my spiritual upbringing, and to sit in the uncomfortability of it, and then to ask myself, what is the deeper meaning here that I might miss because I'm having this immediate reaction? For example, the devil of the world has blinded unbelievers, or whatever it said. I mean, I can just hear sermons in my head. And it reminded me of, I don't know if any of you follow the Naked Pastor on Instagram or Facebook, the Naked Pastor. And the Naked Pastor this week had a split, kind of a split screen, except it was a comic. How I view deconstructing. It has a group of people over on one side, sort of watching the person, and then clear over here is another person, the person who's deconstructing, and there's a bunch of question marks, and the person is just looking around. So a state of wondering. This is how I view deconstructing. And then the next one over is, this is how they view deconstructing. And it has all of them on the other side going, oh, and instead of me standing there thinking, it's me being hauled off by the devil. And this is kind of the image that I have. And it so resonates with me. When I came out of the closet, I could feel the flames of hell from the others coming at me because I was being blinded by the devil. I was being carried off by the deceit of the enemy and all this other stuff. That really was my experience. And so reading this, I loved that the Naked Pastor was able to say in comic form what my experience is, which was, that wasn't, I said to my friend recently, I'm in ministry, right? Ministry. Because she talks to me like I'm, some heathen or something. And it's nice to have somebody see through that and to see an alternate narrative besides the devil carried you off.
See, I'm just wondering because, with texts like this, and many other texts, right? There are many approaches to reading them, to dealing with them. But in liberation theology and feminist theology, ecofeminist theology, queer theology, there are different strategies for moving through difficult texts. Phyllis Tribble has a book called Texts of Terror.
Ooh.
And it's so good. You have to read it. If you have,
okay,
you will appreciate it. It is the texts of mostly the women who have been the rapes, the pillages, the murders, where these characters are treated very, very badly. But there are different approaches to reading these texts, and one approach is you don't read them. We decide that there are certain texts in the scripture that are so bound up in culture and particular philosophy that they're so harmful that we can't reclaim them. There's nothing you can do to sort of redeem the text or bring it into a liberated space. So we don't use it.
Mhm, mhm.
And then there is, another tradition of like, well, actually, you can read this in a way that is liberative or whatever. I'm just curious for you, so where do you lean? In what direction do you lean when you encounter a text from your past, your religious upbringing that has been weaponized against you? How do you, what's your, where have you landed? I think you were just telling a little bit of that story, but
Yeah, yeah. Well, my first response is not a response, it's a reaction, and it takes me a minute to figure out what that reaction is and to kind of unpack that a little bit. If I'm really grace-filled and patient with myself and the process, I do sit with it, I don't ignore it. But I think probably for 5 solid years, I didn't think of it as ignoring it. I thought of it more as just letting it be what it is or was. I used to have this image in my head when I was for 5 years, I didn't go to any church. And I was done with God and church, religion, all of it, which was this really critical and important time in my self-development and my development of my spirituality. But I imagined I always had this room in my head, and where are God and I placed in this room? And I used to sort of envision us all cozied up, or, him with his arms around me, and a him and an older man. And then I went through this, kind of we're back to back in opposite corners, and then eventually came to the place, and it took 5 years where we just sit contentedly side by side. And there's not really anything good or bad, just being together in experience. And that's maybe how I feel about scriptures that are problematic. Just we're coexisting, maybe.
Huh. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for sharing
Yeah.
a bit about that.
And that word weaponized is so powerful. So powerful. Thank you for saying that.
Been weaponized against all different kinds of people for different reasons to maintain control, maintain something.
Yeah.
And I think this is one of those texts, and you can find many of them in Paul. Surprising.
And this might be why I struggle with Paul so much.
Sure.
We're going to be okay. we might make it.
I think so.
Paul and me.
The two of you have some well, he has some work to do. What else? Shall we go to the gospel, because we're going to end a little early today, aren't we?
We are.
Okay.
We are. Jake was saying that when he thinks about covenant, he thinks about the rainbow, which I just love so much. I've never in my life until this week, Jake, had a rainbow that I felt like I drove right through. You know how it always feels like it's in front of you and you can never quite reach it? I had this experience of driving through it on the freeway, and it was amazing.
Wow.
So I'm glad you said that. And then Lori said, I live in the South where most people's views of scripture are pretty inflexible. Whew. Yeah, and Earl, a free pass to avoid Paul. Always had a problem with thoughts on women. Thank you all. I love these comments so much. Mark 9, 2-9. 6 days later, Jesus took with him Peter and James and John and led them up a high mountain apart by themselves, and he was transfigured before them. And his clothes became dazzling white, such as no one on earth could bleach them. And there appeared before them, or to them, Elijah with Moses, who were talking to Jesus. Then Peter said to Jesus, Rabbi, it is good for us to be here. Let us make 3 dwellings, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah. He did not know what to say, for they were terrified. I love that. Then a cloud overshadowed them, and from the cloud there came a voice. This is my son, the beloved. Listen to him. Suddenly, when they looked around, they saw no one with them anymore, but only Jesus. As they were coming down the mountain, he ordered them to tell no one about what they had seen until after the Son of Man had risen from the dead.
Well, we certainly know why the lectionary paired it with the text from 2 Kings. And I just noticed, I don't know why I've never noticed this before, but in Second Kings, there's the repetition of silence. And in Mark, throughout the Gospel of Mark, silence is a big thing. It's called, the scholars call it the messianic secret. Don't give away the identity of Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
Don't tell him to be quiet. And that happens in the Second Kings story too. Keep silent.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So the transfiguration. There's identity. There's a lot of identity stuff going on in this text, right?
Yes, but what do you mean by that? A lot of identity stuff.
Well, I think this is the moment when the disciples really get it, like, or at least these two disciples and in Mark's story, like they see Jesus in this particular way with the prophets, with these figureheads of these stories that are so sacred and important to them. And Jesus is being aligned with Judaism in a way that before hasn't been quite as explicit as is happening here. And there's a repetition of the baptismal covenant that we get in other places where God, the holy, the divine, is naming Jesus. This
is my son.
Does he and does it say my beloved? Is that in this? I didn't actually flip it. I don't know.
Yeah, the beloved. This is my son, the beloved. Listen to him.
Yeah.
Where does it say this is my son with whom I am well pleased? Or is that just a different?
In a different gospel.
Yeah. Listen to him.
Listen to him. Yeah, and so it's a naming. It's which is I think so significant to how well it's very Lutheran actually. There's nothing UCC about the way that I think about baptism. It's all based in Lutheran thought and theology because I think it is so beautiful. The Lutheran tradition takes its cue on baptism from these texts and the Transfiguration. I'm using it because it's a re-articulation of baptism. The primary action is Jesus is being identified. Something about Jesus's identity is being called out and, named. It's both it's like an incantation. There's something being spoken into being about Jesus with that belovedness. This is the truth, the core of your identity, which is the truest thing about any of us, is that we are beloved. Even more significant than whatever names we're given at birth. And to me, it is an incredibly powerful thought. So I like this text.
That's interesting. It befuddles me. So I love that you like this text. I was also thinking about identities that are assigned to people, not just names, but identities. Yeah.
Right. And in this, I think that it cuts right through, it cuts right through those identities. Like, you are not what other people have told you you are. They're not the roles that you've taken on. You're not your work. You're not your job. The truth about you. The clearest identity you have is this, that you are loved. I was actually talking about this word love with someone this week. They said something about the Christian idea of love, and I kind of had to stop and think about what that person might mean by using that word. When I say, when I talk about love, which I actually don't know if I talk about love very much or not in a church context. I know I say beloved quite a bit, but
that's what I hear all the time.
Beloved. I realize that I'm talking about worth. I'm talking about
Mhm.
worth and belonging.
Mhm. Belonging. It's really interesting because there's a conversation that goes on in, some chaplain circles that I'm a part of, and people will pose the question, how do you communicate with or pray for, or what rituals do you do for people who are not spiritual or who are in a physical condition that they can't express what their faith, frameworks might be? And I mean, the answer was just so instant for me, which is I always speak to you have always belonged, you have always been loved from the moment you were born until you take your last breath and beyond, you will be loved because that transcends any
Yes.
label or religion or framework that anybody might have. And I think most people would find it to be pretty unoffensive.
Yeah.
I hope.
Yeah, and just
Mhm.
true. Like, oh, there's some truth.
Mhm, mhm. And also, that's what I would wanna hear. If somebody didn't know me or anything about me and they showed up and I was dying, that's what I would need to hear, want to hear.
Yeah.
You belong, you matter. You are significant.
I think that that's what I can't remember where I picked this up, but I heard at some point or read that all humans are looking for love and belonging. To be
Mhm.
told, I see you, you
Mhm.
and you belong.
Mhm.
And in my experience, that's true for me. That's true for
Mhm.
my child. That's true for my
Mhm.
partner. That's true for people I encounter
Mhm.
in the congregation and outside of the congregation. It's just very
Mhm.
consistently seems to be a human longing.
Mhm.
Um, I know we're almost done, and I wanted to share a little. Someone gave me a little Valentine,
Oh, I wanna see.
and yeah, we won't. I mean, I don't like Valentine's Day. It's definitely not my favorite thing, but I got this little poem, and it is the best.
I will always lean my heart as close to your soul as I can. I will always lean my heart as close to your soul as I can. I love that.
Isn't that
The
lovely?
meaning.
I'm pretty sure this is part of the love poems to God.
Mm.
Oh, but it works in all kinds of ways, doesn't it? Just happy Valentine's Day. Happy Transfiguration Sunday, which is on Valentine's Day.
Yeah, yeah.
Funny. Yeah.
Yes. You all don't know this, but I told Jen that I do need to end a few minutes before 4 today, and we started many minutes after 3,
Sorry.
and there's grace for all of it, I'm quite sure.
That's right.
I always enjoy sharing space with you, Jen. I love that people are joining us and interacting with us. Thank you so, so much,
Yeah.
and I look forward to hearing the message on Sunday.
Well, we'll see. Thanks for helping me think it through.
Okay, everybody. Blessings and love your way. See
Bye,
you next
friend.
week. Bye-bye.